I am Brandon Clark. This is my co-host Swal Hall, and today we're meeting on uncommon ground. So there's a lot to talk about. In the week we did our debate. I feel like we always have to catch up with all the news we miss. Obviously, there's a lot on Biden. We're going to start there, discuss from his prostate cancer diagnosis to the cover-up, mental health, cognitive decline scandal things that's also taking over the news. We'll talk about the white South African, the Afrikaner refugees, Trump's meeting with the South African president, the white genocide, all the things that are entailed with that. And then we'll end in terms of our discussion on one big, beautiful bill this passed in the House, probably going to ping pong between the Senate and the House before it becomes law, but still worthy of talking about. Still a lot of things in there worth discussing. And then we're going to end on a pretty spicy should the N-word be censored debate. So stay tuned for that. Going to be good all throughout the episode. To start with Biden, I guess we can start on the prostate cancer side of things. It kind of just leaked that he got the diagnosis. I think it was like a week or two ago, pretty recently.
Yeah, it was on the 16th.
On the 16th. Yeah. So I knew it was real recently. Had the diagnosis for prostate cancer, something that is, I mean, horrendous. It's scary. I mean, cancer that's like, it's the oh no word for anyone. And of his age, obviously, makes it even more scary. I guess before we get into the, did he know? Did he that? I'm curious what you would have to say about it. I would say, I guess it's not recommended to test for those after 70. So, like, the idea that he should have known is kind of preposterous to
Right.
me. More so, I just send my condolences out to him. But yeah, Swal, you can go ahead and take it.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it has a 9 on the Gleason score, which means it's a very aggressive form of cancer, which
Yeah.
is very unfortunate. I wouldn't wish cancer on my worst enemy. It's not fun.
Yeah.
My mom went through it, and I've seen many people go through it, as I'm sure all the listeners have as well. So yeah, my heart goes out to Biden and the whole Biden family and his wife and his kids and stuff. So that's a bummer. Yeah, I don't have much else on that part of it other than, uh, I hope that either he can recover well or that he has sort of a
How
peaceful end to his life here.
How has the response been in the circles you're in? On mine, I see a lot of honestly hate and vitriol from both sides of like, you got
Yeah.
the lefties who are like, oh, you didn't do enough for Gaza, and then the conservatives who are like, you deserve it. Like, so what has the reaction been in the circles that you're in, kind of?
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily I most of my circles outside of here aren't political. They're mostly religious. So most of mine have just been pray for the Bidens, pray for Joe. We may disagree, but we nobody, wishes cancer. So it's been mostly positive on my end, but I could see I have seen a little bit of the mental decline, and we'll talk about that as
Yeah.
well.
Mhm.
But on the cancer stuff, I haven't seen anybody too negative on
Yeah.
that,
So before we
thankfully.
jump to the mental health stuff, what do you think? Do you think he knew? Do you think this is something that's been covered up? Do you think
No,
it just happened?
I don't think he knew. Mostly because, like I mentioned, my mother, when she found out, she was already at stage 4. Like there are signs, and if you're really tuned in with your body, of course, you can tell when something's up. But pinpointing that to cancer is
Yeah.
sort of a jump for a lot of people. You don't immediately think, oh my, I don't. Oh, it's prostate, right? So you don't
Mhm.
think, oh, I've got pains, whatever. It's cancer. Like you don't
Yeah.
jump to that. So I doubt he knew.
And with
Well, I
prostate
mean,
cancer specifically, it can be rather benign. Like there can be
right,
not a
right.
lot of
Not a
symptoms.
science. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So anybody thinking that, I mean, have fun with your conspiracies. I don't really know what that adds.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he knew and he worked through it. Okay, then he's a
Mhm.
badass. Like, why
Yeah.
is that a bad thing? We like actor Chadwick Boseman, when he had cancer and passed away, and everybody was like, "What? He lied about it." We were all like, "Oh, he was hardcore. He did or a Black Panther movie, and nobody knew." So like, why would it be any different with the
Yeah.
president?
I completely agree. I think it's just, I don't know, it's like such a divided and partisan time, and people are just waiting for
Right.
anything to be like, we gotcha. And it's unfortunate that that has to fall into it, which I guess kind of plays into the mental health side of things, which the other part that's been going around, I think Jake Tapper kind of has a lot to do with it. With he has a book coming out with someone talking about the Biden cover up, and MAGA, of
Right.
course, is jumping on it and saying, like there's so much cognitive decline with Biden. Uh, my take is that I don't think that there's any cognitive disabilities with Biden. I don't think we have any evidence of that. And then I also think like the idea that there's like an on off switch for cognitive disabilities is if like, oh, well, sometimes he's a bumbling idiot, but then other times, he can read off a teleprompter. Like if you have dementia, you're not going to be able to read off the teleprompter. Like it's not like your dementia only kicks in when you're off script or something, right? Like that's kind of insane to me. I do think he very clearly had like lost a step. I think it's like the normal kind of
Right.
cognitive decline for someone of that age, which by the way, Trump's going to be older by the time he leaves office. So it's like, if you want to say like, oh, he was too old to be in office, I would say, yeah, probably, which is a large reason why he stepped out, why the Democrats lost. But for me, it's when you take the step of, well, there's a big conspiracy of he couldn't run the country and all of this, that you kind of start to lose me.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure about the cognitive decline. I know obviously there's Jake Tapper's book and John Levitt from the Obama's aide, who potentially admitted to hiding some. But like you said, I've thought that there was mental decline, but nothing that wasn't normal for like senior citizens. Like
Mm-hmm.
all of our memory starts to go as we get older and older and older. Um, and obviously, it affects some people worse than others, just depending on your health and your body and just the life you've lived. Um, but I'm curious to know kind of what you think about cognitive tests for the presidency in general. Do you think that that's something that we should be requiring when candidates are over a certain age, or maybe just even if they're in office and it's just sort of like a mental health checkpoint? Is that something you think is overstepping, or do you think that's needed?
No, I absolutely think there should be probably more cognitive testing. I think if anything, like Biden could have showed us that, like that is a necessary thing. But I'm also of the idea that like we could just like age limit presidents to where like we probably shouldn't
Yeah,
have senior
I wouldn't
citizens
be
in
against
office.
that either.
Yeah. But yeah,
I think
I
that's a
think it's like,
bipartisan thing right there.
yeah, it's the most avoidable problem ever. But like if
Yeah,
both sides are going to keep electing like old men to the office, we're obviously
right,
going to have this problem.
right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't have much to add other than obviously I want, Biden to recover well if he can, and I want to just express my condolences, as you said, for the Biden family. And if anything was being, covered up, obviously that's an injustice. We as the country deserve to know if our president is mentally there. So if more stuff comes out in the future that there actually is, early onset dementia or something that's been in Biden for years and years, then obviously then we'll talk about it when that happens. But as of right now, it seems like it's mostly hearsay.
Yeah,
So
and I guess the last thing I would want to add to it before we move to the next topic is there's also just not much reason for this scandal to exist or like the conspiracy to be true.
right,
Why, like you have to ask yourself, why would Democrats be so gung-ho about Biden that they're like,
right,
well, despite dementia, despite us knowing that he has cognitive disabilities, we're still going to run him as the president. Like Democrats have a really deep bench right now. Like we have Gavin Newsom, like Kamala Harris was a big name as well. We have Gretchen Whitmer, like Pete Buttigieg. There's plenty of people that we could have ran. It's not like we needed Biden.
right,
They made the strategic choice, which I think America showed it was the wrong one, but they made the strategic choice that, okay, Biden is our best bet in beating Trump. And that's why they ran him. I think it's that simple. And it was a miscalculation.
right. Like the idea that they plan to, shuffle Biden out last minute,
Yeah.
shove Kamala in there where they knew that it would upset people to some degree. Like that was their master plan. Like, I mean, if you think they're that dumb, like I guess that's a plan that you
Yeah.
can do, but
It's like,
it
and that's
clear
what it
it
comes down to.
yeah, I mean it clearly plays as them making it up as they were going,
Yeah.
because they were just dealing with the public backlash towards the image of Biden after those couple debates, and whether or not he actually had issues, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Everybody thought he did, and that's why they made the moves that they made. So yeah,
Yeah, and like you said, that's kind of what it comes down to. You realize like, oh, it's just people who literally want to think like, oh, Democrats are so stupid and they're so bad and that they would
right,
do all that, and it just doesn't make much sense. Like, yeah.
right,
But
Right.
yeah, so on to the next topic is the white Afrikaners, the white South African refugees. I don't know. They've been described
Yeah.
and labeled all kinds of ways. They're refugees from South Africa. They do happen to be white. They had their refugee status expedited by the Trump administration. The reason this is a conversation is it comes after one of the first actions Trump took was pausing the refugee system. He revoked visas specifically for Sudanese refugees in Sudan. For those who don't know, even the US recognizes that there is a genocide going on. Like the US has accused one of the factions there of committing genocide. So, like, as he says, oh, I'm expediting these refugees because of genocide, which we'll get into also about those claims, he's denying others their refuge, even though they're also experiencing genocide. This can also apply to the Congo, to Gaza, even though there's more debate over whether or not that one's a genocide, obviously. But he's revoking all of these for countries that are predominantly brown, predominantly black individuals. And then he expedites the refugee for white South Africans on the claims of genocide that are rather unfounded. That's kind of where the discussion comes to be, or where the friction point is. Swal, I guess first, before we get too much into it, you can lay out where you stand, how you understand it, those kinds of things.
Yeah, so this is going to be a spot where we probably mostly agree. I, as a person, just as a person who cares about other humans, and as a Catholic, and just as an overall good guy, hopefully, I
Mm.
care about human dignity and I care about human lives. So I support helping those who are persecuted, regardless of whether they're white, brown, Asian. Doesn't matter to me.
Mm.
Um, but like you pointed out, there's some inconsistency in the Trump administration here, and I think that that needs to be called out because if there's people who are fleeing from violence and we have the means to help them, then I believe we have a moral obligation to do so. Uh, with great power comes great responsibility, to quote Spider-Man, or quote Uncle Ben, I should say.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, obviously we've got um, Christians in the Middle East who are refugees. We've got people in Gaza on both sides who, need help. And I think that we should be doing our part for all of them. And so, on one hand, I'm, happy that these 59 uh, people were able to be, I guess, rescued. But I'd like to see more, obviously. So,
Yeah, it's for me, it's like I don't even care, even if like which genocide isn't happening, which again we'll get into in a second. But aside from that, like let's just say it's not happening, even if genocide wasn't happening, I wouldn't care if these people got refuge if they needed it. What
right.
for me, the only problem is the imbalance to where it seems like for far less, the standard is far less for Trump to expedite these people, while like for instance, he just overturned the temporary protected status for Haitians, and the status or the condition in Haiti is getting worse and worse. Like more people are dying year over year. Disease is more widespread. Famine is setting in, and then you have like the places actually experiencing genocide, like Congo, Sudan, all of these, where it's just I wish that the standard was the same on both sides. And then when he claims like white genocide or whatever, this seems to be like some conspiracy that he got from Elon Musk or whatever. But genocide is a very specific legal term, and I'm curious what you think of his use of his willingness to use the word here when he hasn't used genocide to describe Gaza. He hasn't used genocide to talk about Sudan, to talk about the Congo, but he's so willing to use it here. What are your thoughts of that kind of characterization?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the Gaza thing is way more publicized. I know a little bit more about that situation than what's going on in South Africa. But from what I've seen has been some clips of people chanting. I don't want to get get us demonetized. Well, we're not monetized, so
Yeah.
I guess I'll say whatever. Saying like "kill the white farmers" and yada yada yada. Um, which is at the very least genocidal language. Whether or not they're actually, carrying through with the genocide is, I guess, a different thing. And so I don't think it's totally misplaced to at least hint towards, hey, a genocide could occur here, or we might be at the beginnings of one. Whereas in the Gaza situation, it's a little bit more, at least on the surface. If you want to get down to people's intent and all of that, then maybe you could dig it apart. But at least on the surface, it's a little bit more of a war situation than just a straight up, like, need the Israelis aren't saying like kill all the Palestinians. That's not lines that they're just saying. Like
They're
kill all
saying
Hamas,
they are
sure,
saying that, but yeah.
uh, but they're not just calling for the deaths of Palestinians on the grounds of them being Palestinian. It's about land, and there's a little bit more going on there. And so yeah, I don't think it's totally misplaced, but like I said, I'm not really an expert on what's going on in South Africa, other than the few clips I've seen on social media, which I think are horrendous, by the way, saying to kill the white farmers. Um,
Yeah, yeah, no, and to be clear, like I think the racism is a problem. And again, if you're a victim of racial violence, as far as I'm concerned, that's enough to seek refuge. Like for me,
sure.
that's fine, right? When you're making the jump to white genocide, like for instance, like black people experience violence in South Africa far more. Of 30,000 deaths the last year, 59 attacks were on farmers. I think there was like seven or something that they could dictate were white or whatnot. So
Right.
it's not like widespread. To the idea that like racism equates genocide, you would
Right.
then have to say like that black people in America are experiencing genocide and stuff because we're victims of racial violence and racial
Yeah.
epithets and all of this to higher levels than white South Africans are. And it's like there's a difference between genocide, which is like a very serious like thing, and then racism. And for me, like I wouldn't even mind it as much if he was calling the genocides genocide. Like if he was like, hey, there's a genocide in Sudan, there's a genocide in the Congo, there's a genocide in Gaza. But with all of these, he's not only not saying it, but like with Gaza, he's like, no, we'll send our U.S. troops over there and ethnically cleanse them. Like we'll go help Israel finish the job, you know. And he even said Israel should finish the job, right? So like as far as like actual genocides, he's like, oh, I don't know, you know, we can't really use that word. And then there's something that is so clearly not genocide. And then all of a sudden it's like so okay to throw around genocide. And that's what gets me.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not saying that the South African thing is genocide. I'm just saying clearly, kill all white farmers. That sentence is a pretty genocidal minded thing to say. Is all I'm saying. Um, and I don't think that that's really that under dispute. But yeah, what the actual raw numbers are, you said seven. Obviously, that's not a genocide, but if every all the not every, but if a bunch of white people in America were saying kill all the black African Americans in America, I'd be like, hey, that sounds pretty genocidal. Probably chill. And so I don't think that that language is good or I saw a big mass of people chanting it. That's the video I saw on Twitter. I think that's horrendous. And yeah, like I said, I agree with the politically selective thing that Trump is doing. I'm not down with that. If we're going to be a refuge center for people who need help, then it's got to be open up to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just be picking and choosing. And it's not even like it's like allies or it's just picking and choosing because maybe they're white. I don't know.
Yeah. Quickly, how much of the meeting with the South African president did you see where he showed the highlights? He showed videos of black people being racist to white people. That was a good part. While the South African president was like, please don't show me this. I don't need to see it. Forced him to watch it. And then showed videos of race-based violence of black people committing violence onto white people. The only problem was that it was from the wrong country and it wasn't South Africa. I forget what the country that the videos were from, but they weren't from South Africa. And like, so that was all over social media the next day. But what do you think of like, I don't know, just the way that he'll act towards world leaders? Like we saw with Zelensky, now with the South African president. Like, what do you think of that?
Um, well, I mean, first I think it's funny, but sad funny, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like it's funny just because you're like, this is dumb.
Yeah. All the wrong kinds of
Like the,
fun.
the the memes from the Zelensky meeting. I mean, that was some comedy gold. But um, on one hand, it's like embarrassing, but on the other hand, it's like, oh yeah, the world leaders are also just guys like us. They have their friends. They hung out, blah blah blah. They had college times. Like these are all regular people too. So on one hand, it humanizes everybody. On the other hand, it really makes us look unprofessional. It makes us look like we're not a serious country, and that's not good optically, obviously. But then again, not that you have to wear a suit or anything. This man Zelensky walking around in his little T-shirt and his suit jacket is pretty funny too. So people, I don't know, world leaders, I don't know. Obviously, I would like them to respect the presidency, but at the end of the day, if deals get done, if stuff gets passed, then optics are only one side of the coin. But yeah, I didn't see the video, but it sounds pretty embarrassing by the way you described it.
Yeah, I'll have to send it to you.
Especially him
It's
getting the
funny.
country wrong is
Yeah,
hilarious.
that's a funny part, which it was that part wasn't caught in real time or nothing like, odd happened in real time. That was caught after. But the funniest part is when he goes to show this man videos of like black people saying racist things to white people. And he's like, listen, like, I get your point. We don't have to watch this. And
Right.
Trump's like, nah, we're watching this. Like you're gonna get you're seeing this. And it's just like, what are we doing? And then I'm talking to my buddy about this the other day, and he's like, yeah, I appreciate that Trump is standing up to these countries and showing them that they can't play around and mess with us. And I'm like, what has South Africa ever done to America? Like, what is
Yeah, what is he talking about?
poor South Africa ever done that
Oh.
but gets us just bullying their leader? But yeah, no, just insanity to me. I'm glad we are mostly in agreement on that.
Yeah, yeah.
If you didn't have anything else to add, we could jump over to the
Let's move on to
the
the
one
one
big
big beautiful
beautiful
bill.
bill. Yes. So obviously Trump ran on a lot of things. Tax cuts were the biggest ones. This bill is all encompassing. It fits under the umbrella of reconciliation. For those who don't know, you can only pass things through reconciliation if it is directly tied to the budget. So rather than making new laws, this entire thing will apply to the budget. So it's like tax stuff, it's like border stuff, but it's all pertaining to budget. So it's like money for the budget wall. It's the tax cuts that predominantly are for the wealthy. I don't know. Swal would disagree with that. But from what we see from the Committee for Responsible Federal Budgeting, anyone making under $51,000 a year, the average salary for an American quickly, I think, is like 38 or 39,000. So what the average American makes, 51,000 or less, your taxes are actually going to increase by 2026, as many of the provisions for the middle class, once again, are temporary. A lot of the ones that he ran on, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, these are temporary. They're also not straight cuts, they're deductions. So you pay the taxes, then you can get the deduction back at the end of the year. I think the no tax on tips is 2 years and overtime is 4 years. Don't quote me on that. I do know they're both temporary. And a few other things. I don't want to, railroad too long on all the things I hate about it, though. So I'll let you jump in real quick with your opinion, Swall, and then we can go back and forth on what we agree or disagree on.
Yeah, so I saw that it barely passed, by the way.
Yeah, by one vote.
215 to 214
Yeah.
is pretty tight.
Mhm.
And yeah, like you said, I mean, large tax cuts, welfare reforms, border stuff. And the thing that obviously I hate the most about it is the $4 trillion debt ceiling hike.
Yep.
Um, and obviously Rand Paul called it reckless. He spoke out against that part of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I support some of the bill and some of it I don't, which is just the nature of big bills, even if they're big and beautiful.
Yeah,
Um,
that
so
was,
you
that
know,
was a pretty spot
obviously,
on impression.
thank you. I've spent way too much practicing.
Yeah.
So obviously I support like the border stuff, welfare reforms. But yeah, the debt increase is dangerous, and I just don't like this idea of keep on kicking the can down the road to future generations and future and future and future, and eventually something that the bill comes due, so to speak, in
Yep.
some way. And so I don't love that we just kind of push it on to the next group. Um, but yeah, overall, I think anything that uh, any of the tax cuts that help businesses or anything and help generate stuff in the economy is good and all of that. But yeah, the debt ceiling, not a fan of, and of course, not a fan of people who make under a certain amount having their taxes go up when it should be them who get the bigger tax cuts. And
Yep.
I'm fine with the rich people getting tax cuts too, like cut it for everybody as far as I'm concerned, but you got to look out for the little guy. So
Mhm.
yeah, that sucks. That
Yeah,
part of it.
and so my biggest contingencies with it is it largely is just a renewal of the 2017 tax cuts. The 2017 tax cuts cost trillions of dollars, and then we know now that it only brought an increase of $6 billion a year in additional business investment. That's, I mean, a terrible ROI. That is a horrendous return on investment. Like it would take 300 something years to pay off the tax cuts for what they were bringing. And then the second is the cuts, the incredible amount of cuts they're slipping into this one. They cut Medicaid, they're cutting FEMA, they're cutting medical research, climate sciences, climate research, federal endowments to universities, of which is also widely used for research. They're cutting food stamps, as you mentioned, welfare programs. The Department of Education is getting slashed, and these are things that I just think massively, not only massively affect the middle class more, but they're also much smarter investments. Like for research, we bring back like $2.50 something cents for every dollar we spend on NIH research. But we're slashing that, but we're spending on tax cuts that bring a terrible ROI back. So like it just economically and fiscally doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And it feels like we're gonna rob the poor to give to the rich.
Yeah, when it comes to obviously like that ROI that you're saying, I mean that's not even ROI because that's not return on
Yeah.
investment. That's the opposite of
Yeah.
ROI, whatever that would be. Yeah, that stuff I'm all against. When it comes to some of the welfare stuff, some of that I'm in favor of. Some of it, if we replace it with things that are better, which remains to be seen, fingers
Mhm.
crossed. But I think that there are obviously better systems that we can integrate than like the food stamps and the version of Medicaid and Medicare that we've had. Um, but
Like
do I
what?
trust this
What would
administration to do
what
any
would
of
you
that
want?
stuff?
What would you want in place of those
So,
things?
like for food stamps, for instance, I would rather do UBI. I would rather them because food stamps only work at specific stores, specific items. There's a bunch of rules. Like I know I had a buddy who was on it, and I get why they do it because they, you know, want to make sure that you're like buying food with it and specific stuff. But it's like, you know, and I know there's other welfare things for like diapers or
Hmm.
formula or whatever. But it's like if you're a single mom, yeah, food stamps are nice. You can feed your kids, but it's like that's not going to put gas in your tank. That's not going to. So I'd rather them just have the money and be able to decide because only they know what they really can use it for in their lives. Whereas the government's obviously just not going to know the details. So I think things like that are a better welfare system to let the people decide. But like I said, do I trust any of these people to make that happen? No.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Just I guess it's off tangent, but quickly, a lot of I think it's weird because I don't support the people or the motives I think behind a lot of people who are attacking things like food stamps, but I do agree with some of the things they're saying. I think that it could be a lot more efficient if rather than like the food stamps model, we kind of did like the WIC model and expanded that.
yeah,
Because when my child was first born and we were on WIC, it was really helpful that we could both get like fruit, vegetables, but then we
right.
could also get like formula and things like that pertaining to what we needed. So like if we expanded that,
Yep.
less regulation, something like that. So I do there's some agreement there. I don't know. I'm agnostic, I guess, to whether it should be a UBI or whatever. What do you think of the provisions that Trump ran on in this bill, like the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security didn't make it. I think there's some sort of a deduction or something he slipped in, but there's not the straight tax cut like he ran on. But no tax on tips and overtime are temporary and they're done as deductions rather than tax cuts. What do you think of him kind of slipping it in like that after running on them so hard for the last 2 years?
Well, I think it's lame that they're deductions.
Yeah.
I was happy about the policy in general because I am a tipped employee, so that
Mm,
actually directly affects me and my family's income.
mm,
And so obviously, like I'll still get a benefit from it. I'll get the deduction or whatever, but yeah, it would just be better if there was just a flat, like you just get all of it. I get
yep.
all my tips. That would be nice, and then I would know, and I don't have to wait a whole freaking calendar year just to figure out. Oh, sweet, I got like $200 back or whatever it ends up being.
Mm,
Because I doubt it's going to be a deduction that's the full value of all my
yeah.
tips
Yeah.
that I paid in. Like, there's just no chance of that. So, yeah, a little sneaky, but to be honest, I didn't think we were going to get anything on that front. So I'm just happy he did something with the rather than just blatantly lying because that's what I thought when both because both him and Kamala were running on the no tax on tips thing, and I was like, I'll believe it when I freaking see it, dude. Like
Mm.
that's never gonna happen.
I
So
think there
yeah,
was some added pressure because just quickly there was the original budget resolution wouldn't have had enough to fit it in, and then in the Senate, I don't know if you know this, Jackie Rosen, a Democrat, brought a no tax on tip act to the floor, and it passed 100 to 0. Every senator voted yes on it. So like,
wow, wow,
I think that added pressure to Trump to like, okay, like I have to add this to the bill now, or the
yeah.
Democrats are going to get the victory.
Okay, yeah, no, I hadn't heard that. Well, that's awesome. Shout out to the Democrats for that one. Then, like I said, I mean, I wish it was a little bit more, but we'll take a
Mm.
win where we can get it. So, yeah, I mean, What else to say about the this, I guess. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about the debt? I know you're a pretty big tax guy, so you probably don't care as much about the deficit being run up. But what are your thoughts on that part of it?
On so you kind of cut for a
Oh,
second.
just
How much
oh,
it
just
adds to the
the
deficit?
yeah, the 4 trillion debt ceiling hike and all of that. Do you have any insider
Yeah,
debt or stuff
I
on that?
think for me, I'm not as fearful as like the debt and deficit as maybe you might be, as a lot of conservatives are. I do think it's a concern, and I think that one, if we're going to add to the debt and deficit, it needs to be really justifiable, right? Like I would be fine to add to the debt and deficit if we're giving everyone health care, right?
Right,
But
right.
when we're doing like tax cuts that don't bring a lot of investment back, then it's when I'm like, why are we doing this? And I think that when you're going to add to the debt and deficit, there should be debt reduction measures. This is something that Biden did really well during his tenure. Was he signed a lot of debt into law, but then he signed, I think, between $2 and $3 trillion of debt reduction, also measures that would reduce the debt over time, or like, pay for themselves after like a decade or so. And so I think that to be fiscally responsible, there should be debt reduction measures. And with tax cuts, there's not a way to do that naturally. So what they do is it's always matched with these huge spending cuts. So that's what gets me is like, one, we're adding horrendously to the debt and deficit, which, as you said, it kicks the can down the road. Eventually, we have to pay this off, right? Eventually, there's going to be a tax or something to gear payments towards the debt and deficit. And as long as we're adding to it, we're just kicking that down the road. And while doing that, while adding to the debt and deficit, we're not even benefiting the people who are down the line going to have to pay for that, because they're not getting universal health care. They're not getting free college. They're not getting guaranteed child care. They're not getting anything that's going to help their lives. They're getting tax cuts that for them, they might get a few $100s, right? And then their taxes will increase in a few years. But like, they're going to lose the ability for Medicaid if, let's say, they were low income individuals. They're going to lose uh, food stamps if they fell under those qualifications. Public education is going to be less funded. Like these things that affect them umpteen times more.
Yeah, and this is one of the frustrating things about politics to me is that I feel like there's a few basic things that we should both sides of the aisle, all sides of the aisle, be able to agree on,
Mhm.
such as free healthcare. I call it like free unelective healthcare because if it's something that is not really necessary, like if it's just a cosmetic surgery or something, then I think you should kind of pony up and pay it yourself. But if it's going to be something where you're actually sick or you actually need, medicine or surgery, I feel like it's not controversial to say,
Yeah.
hey, we have the money through taxes to do this. We live in a first world country. Let's just have this as a little perk.
Hmm.
Doesn't seem that crazy to me. And it's like, what if we could get these few basic things? It's like the rest of politics around all of that stuff becomes way simpler, in
Yep.
my
I
opinion,
totally agree.
once everybody's basic needs are taken care of. And it just seems silly to me that we can't agree on this, but obviously it's more on my side of the aisle that's the problem here. But I also think it's a communication issue on the left
Yep.
because I think that the way that they pitch it, or at least the way that they talk about it, the right wing people are unable to like contextualize it for their own lives a lot of times. I saw this video, I forget who it was, but it was a leftist guy who went into like the South and he was at like some bar and they were doing like some it was like some fundraiser, like every drink $1 goes to the Jim Bob family for their house that burnt down. And it's
Hmm.
like conservatives on a local level understand this idea of like us all helping each other and
Yeah.
like somewhat of a socialistic situation. Um, but for some reason, the higher level it gets, my neighbors, my whatever, blah 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 blah, it just starts. They start to like lose that connection. So if we can kind of like start small and kind of pitch it that way, I think we can get a lot more people on board. Like just in my own
So
personal life, I've gotten more people onto the healthcare thing just by saying it's just on elective stuff. I'm
yeah.
not talking about the, you know,
Yeah.
plastic surgery. Like nobody's talking about that.
I agree. I think that if you, for the average person, regardless of what side they're on, if you ask them about these common sense kind of things, they would agree. I think the disagreements come down to like largely a psychological phenomenon, something I've called kind of like the web or the tree of beliefs, which I think when a lot of people, especially like normal, if they're not like weirdly obsessed with politics. They're just the
Sure.
normal fixated, like they vote every 4 years or whatever. They kind of just pick a side, and then maybe it's off one or two things. Maybe they
Yep.
they prefer the conservative immigration approach, or they don't like taxes. It's one thing, and then from there, every other belief they have is
Hmm.
associated because of
Hmm.
this one belief. They like, well, my side also thinks these things, so
Yep.
that's the only reason they support that. So maybe they don't like immigration, they could support healthcare, but because, oh, conservatives don't support universal healthcare, now they don't support universal health.
Right.
But the second you like ask them about it, they're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if we could just get past that, I think we could get a lot more progress in politics.
I'm 1,000% with you. I'm a thousand
Awesome.
percent with you.
So did you have anything else about the bill you wanted to add, or should we hop over to our debate?
I say let's hash it out. It's about
All
to get
right.
spicy.
Yes. So I figured I'll just let you go first on this. We're gonna debate whether or not the N-word should be censored. I
Yeah.
guess lay out your case for why you don't think it should be, unless you don't
Yeah.
think that makes sense, and I can go first.
No, I'll go first. So yeah, the reason we chose this is because was it on your channel or was it on our channel that somebody
Uh,
commented that?
it was my channel. It was one of
Okay.
my
Yeah,
shorts.
somebody had said, I forget what they said exactly, but they called Brandon N-word and they wrote it N-word, by the way,
Shut up,
which
N-word is yeah what
yeah,
they.
which is pretty funny. But yeah, and so that's how we came up with this topic. But yeah, so we briefly touched on this in a few episodes. I forget what the context was about censorship, but
Mhm.
I think that essentially I'm okay with it not being censored because of a couple of reasons. And the main one would be that it shines a light on the racists and the jerks. And I forget the name of the, I want to say it was the ACLU or whatever. Has spoken on this, and they share my opinion on this, that we need to be able to shine a light on these people, and so making it so they can't say it online just keeps them like in the dark, like in dark corners of the internet and of dark corners of real like life. And I'd rather them be out in the open and out themselves. Obviously, I think that it can be used in a very harmful way, but I also think, like, I don't know what your stance is. My stance is, if you're in the car and you're a white dude and you're alone and you're listening to Kendrick and the N word comes up, it doesn't bother me. You're just singing. I know that you're not saying it to be offensive. Obviously, there's a difference between that and like, hey, you N word, shut up, like what happened on your YouTube. And so
Mhm.
I think that the people who would use it like non offensively should have the right, and then the people who do use it offensively should have the right, so that we know who they are. So that's essentially my view.
I don't know how you could non-offensively use the N-word, but yeah,
Well, like
no,
I
I
said with the music thing.
yeah. So my opinion on that is, I guess I've actually thought about this a couple times because I don't know if you know who Destiny is, the streamer.
Of course,
He
I know who
he
Destiny
had
is.
so he has like this he had this whole arc a few years ago or whatever where he had said, well, if you're alone, a white person should be able to say the N-word, and he had a black co-host at the time, and they debated over and all this. And my opinion is he's probably right morally that if you're alone, what harm is it gonna? It's an amoral act at that point. But I think that there's a slippery slope in saying that publicly, especially if you're someone with a platform, to be like, well, in private, you can, because then it's like, where is the line drawn? Like, okay, if I'm alone, I can say it. Well, what if I'm in the other room? Can I say it if I'm in the room alone? If there's a black person in the other room? Well, okay, what if I'm in public with a black person, but I say it low enough that he can't hear me, or like, and for me, the slippery slope, I think, is where I would argue there. But yeah, it's probably amoral if you're alone. For me, I think that there's a conjunct that can be met for things that should be censored. And in terms of like hate speech, it would be a history or like a heavy association with discrimination, and then like statistical evidence of negative outcomes with this form of discrimination or speech being used. And I think that the N word fits both of those for me. Obviously, it's pretty closely tied with racism, with Jim Crow, with those kinds of things. So the discrimination part of the conjunct is met. And then the APA did a study of, or did a meta analysis of 372 studies from 1992 to 2022. And it showed increased, or 87% of those were empirical. So mostly like, hard data studies. And it showed that racism, people who had racism done onto them, racist words and things said to them, had increased levels of depression depression, anxiety, suicidality. There's also connections shown in white supremacist ideologies, racist ideologies, leading to mass shootings. So it's pretty connected to violence as well. So I just think the conjunct of clearly having a history with being tied to discrimination and then leading to negative outcomes for an entire group of people sets the basis for some sort of censorship of it.
Now, when it comes to these statistics, are these just experiencing racism, or is this specifically online N-word use? Because I don't
Yeah.
think that those are the same, because I'm going to react a lot differently to a person in my real life coming
Mhm.
up to me and saying the N-word than some dude with an anonymous thing on Twitter. I think most people are emotionally mature enough to literally not bat an eye at that online. Like, you posted it and you were like, "Oh, racist," but were you like, "Oh, it didn't affect you"? Let's be honest, it didn't. I would assume you
Yeah,
weren't
no,
like,
it
"Oh
also
man,
wasn't it
I
also wasn't
like."
it wasn't the N word either.
That's true.
It
That's true.
was
They
kind of
they did
comical in the
they
way
did
that
censor
they
it.
had
That's
said
true.
it.
They
Yeah.
did censor it. So there we
Um,
go, I guess.
yeah.
But so,
Yeah, no,
so
so I
yeah,
guess for me, I guess that the thing is and I'm sorry if we might have had a miscommunication here. I was just talking kind of writ large, whether it's in person or online. Obviously, it's harder
sure.
to censor things on person. But I will also say, to your point, the articles were just experiencing racism.
Cool.
They did distinguish between it's like individualized racism, not like system, like it's not like
Right, right,
somebody
right,
who
right.
like got arrested for weed or something. Like it's
Right now, it's
individualized
like,
racism,
yeah.
but not specific to the N word or specific to being online.
Yeah, and so that's all I would say to push back on that is I'm really doubting the idea that that online type of stuff would have the same. Now, if we're talking about should people be able to use it like that in person, I mean, if you want to get punched in the mouth or shot, like, I
Mhm.
guess so, dude. But I wouldn't. But
But
I mean, me.
do you think like institutions would be right or justified or allowed to have some sort of
Oh,
rules to
yeah, yeah,
prohibit it?
yeah. I mean, in person to me is completely different than social media, because if we're talking
Right.
about like, oh, at my university we're going to kick out the student for calling the other one a slur or whatever,
Yeah.
that's fine, because then we're talking about disciplinary actions where like enrolled into the school and agreed to their
Yep.
like.
Okay, well, we could just do online then. So then you would be against like Facebook or whatever social media, just
Yes,
and
yes.
it putting a restriction or like
Yeah, I'd rather them just demonetize. I'm cool with that. Like, demonetize. Don't let those types of racist posts or whatever. If it's like a blue check on Twitter, like, don't let them get paid off of it. But again, I think we should expose those clowns. And
Um, so my problem with that, and obviously, like I said, I was kind of taking more of like an in-person approach. So I don't have like
sure,
statistics in front of me for cyberbullying. But like, do you think that cyberbullying is like a real problem that we should be preventing, or do you think that it's like kids will be kids? Like, because I know, I like I said, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know cyberbullying, at least has the same effect in terms of like, like with depression, anxiety, leading kids to like commit suicide,
yeah,
things like that.
bringing kids into it is a sort of a different beast, I would say.
Well, it's hard to
I
know, if the social media is writ large
Yeah,
just allowing it, it's
yeah, yeah.
obviously you don't know who
I
it's going
would
to be.
I know it's sort of outside the scope of the discussion, but my solution to that would be more: children can't be on social media. Like, upload your ID to have an account.
Mhm.
Sorry, got to
Yeah,
be 18 or older. This is an adult's place. Like, kids shouldn't be on X. There's porn on there, dude. Like,
yeah.
I that would be my thing. Is like, they shouldn't even be in that type of situation. Now, obviously, with like, what do they call it on the green messenger on iPhone. I don't have an iPhone. iMessage or whatever.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
obviously there's like ways that you could still, like, as I guess it wouldn't be cyber, but digitally bully people.
Mhm.
But I don't think that they should really be in those places to begin with. But yeah, I don't know. And then my other concern would be, what other things then? Cracker? Do we need to ban that? Ghetto?
Mm.
You know
So in
what?
my worldview, I would say those probably wouldn't meet because for me, I think it would be important to meet the conjunct. I think there both needs to be close history or relation with discrimination, and then statistical evidence, strong statistical evidence to show negative outcomes. And anything that met those two, I would be fine with being censored to some level.
Sure. Well, just with like cracker, like, I don't it I wasn't it wasn't until I was an adult, like within the last 5 years, that I realized what that meant. I
Mhm.
had thought my whole life cracker, like, crackers because white people are kind of like pale tannish, like
Mhm.
saltines, like crackers.
Yeah.
And then come to find out it's because cracking the whip, and we're calling them slave owners, essentially slave
Mhm.
drivers,
Yeah.
and that's insulting. And I didn't realize it was that insulting because people just kind of treated it as a silly, like, oh, cracker, who's offended by that? But like now knowing like that was the response, inward, well, cracker, like you know, that's what
Mhm.
you are. And so again, should we ban that? Would you say that that meets it then? Because it was used against to call white people to basically say, hey, either your ancestors or you, or you're basically a slave owner for being a white guy.
Yeah, I
Would
would, I
that
would,
be a banned term?
yeah, well, I would say first off, I've never heard that before, so I didn't know that. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just
See,
learned
it blew your
something
mind.
today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
blew
learned
my mind. I
something.
was like, oh, that's
I
way
also
worse than
thought
I
it was
thought.
just like, they kind of have the similar skin
Yeah,
color. I would say, yeah, that definitely meets one area of my conjunct. If there was any statistical evidence, which I'm sure there would be, right? In terms of
right.
like, obviously that would be wielding in terms of a manner of bullying. So like, I would be
Sure.
fine with that. And I just think it probably comes down like, for me, I'm not as like worrisome towards like negative speech being censored. And I think conservatives more so are like, they just think, which it's weird because with a lot of conservatives, I don't think it's genuine. They'll want like hate speech to be not censored. But then the second that like someone's talking about Donald Trump or something, they're like, well, we have to arrest them and sue them or whatever. But
Yeah, that's insane.
it is something I find a lot more common among conservatives is you guys are like, censorship can't apply to hate speech. And for me, it's like, I'm fine with it. So it's like, I don't like, it's not, I'm indifferent if the word's the N word, if it's cracker, if it's this. What matters to me is if, like, is it a word that is known to be discriminatory and does it negatively affect people? If it meets both of those, censor it.
So I guess I forget who's got the quote, but it's essentially something like that's what freedom of speech is for. It's not for the regular everyday speech that we all do. It's for the horrible things, not horrible, but it's for the things
Yeah, I would
that
disagree with that.
that if so, then what would you say it's for? Because at that
I think it
point,
is, yeah,
what
I
is
think
going to be
Yeah, I think it is
banned?
to
Like,
ensure freedoms of the little man to always have a voice against the big man, right? So like for the people to always be able to speak out against the government without worry of the government punishing them. I think it is to equalize that power imbalance to where the smaller guy, the little guy can speak out against the big guy. And I think it actually flies in the face of what free speech is for when we're saying, well, no, the minority, the little guy has to just be at the whim of the big guy who can use discriminatory language to them.
well, maybe particularly with the N word, but in general, I mean, it could be any horrible term, offensive language, offensive anything. It could be yo mama so some playground,
Yeah.
whatever it is. That's at that level. There's no big guy, little guy. It's just all of us guys. And then I guess the other thing, going back to like casual use, and maybe this is just a disagreement, and I'll take the heat that I'll get from the black community on this, but the way that we use the N word, as in like my brother, my homie, essentially, most of the time is how we use it. I just don't find that to be problematic. If I know that it socially there would be issues, but I just morally I don't think there's anything wrong with a white people person using it in that way. I don't see the issue there, morally speaking. Now, socially, obviously, there's going to be consequences, fights, attacks, maybe deaths. I mean, a lot of stuff could happen if people just started using it that way. But
I think that
morally speaking,
the moral part would come into you're doing something that has these negative implications, right? Like a white person who says the N word often knows the historical implications that come along with the N word. They know what it's probably going to make the person feel like that they're calling it. And I mean, it's different, obviously, if they're using it casually, but even if they're using it casually, they probably say it knowing like, okay, like there's a bit of history behind this word. And I think that like a bit of the forbidden fruit thing, right? Like there's nothing wrong with eating fruit per se, but it was wrong for Adam and Eve to eat the fruit that God had specifically told them not to, right? So I think that like when you know that you shouldn't be doing something, to make the choice to do it anyway kind of adds a level of immorality
sure,
to it.
yeah, and I could see that. Um, but then I would just question, to what degree am I or are we responsible for how other people feel about things that we want to say or do. Like, obviously, there's a line. We should be concerned about that, but
Yeah.
to what degree? Because
And
obviously, there's people who would be offended by me saying like all lives matter. I wouldn't say that, by the way, because
yeah.
I know what that is attached to,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't say that. But generally speaking, that sentence is a normal sentence. So or even uh, Christ is King. I know that that's been co-opted recently,
Hmm.
but 10 years ago that wouldn't have been co-opted. But somebody could have still been offended by it. I'll pray for you. People get
Yeah.
offended by that.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't
So
hold everybody's hand through life.
So
So
I know you got to go. So I'll say one last thing, and then you can
yeah,
say one
sure.
last thing. But I do think there is some common ground there because I do think that there's a line, and I just think that the debate to be had is where the line is at. I think that we can agree there is a line, though. I'm glad because some people, I think that some people would say there is absolutely no line. I do think the line exists. I think that there is. Where should it be drawn? Because, like you said, there's certain things like at the point you're trying to not say what is the one, the Attack on Christmas line where people don't want to say like Merry Christmas or whatever. I don't remember the exact, but you know what I'm talking about. I think when you're like attacking like, oh, we should say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas or whatever,
Right.
you've lost the plot. But I do
Yes.
think there is
Yeah.
something to be said about some levels of discriminatory language. But then yeah, you can whatever you want to end on, and then we can wrap because I know you got to go.
Yeah. Just like I said, I mean, there are like the ACLU. There are organizations who take my stance on this, and I just think that it would be better for us to know X and X, such and such is a racist, such and such said the N word here, and rather than it just being censored and erased from the record, essentially.
Mhm.
Um, and you can mute, you can block, um, you can demonetize. I think there's other ways to kind of like not reward people for this type of behavior, but still allow it to just like exist. Because as you said, there's not really censorship in person. Um, and so just kind of keeping that same consistency online. But I do see with the kids though, um, why you wouldn't want, I don't want some kid going to my son and saying the N word or anything.
Mhm.
So I get that. But yeah, that's all I had to say on that.
Awesome. Yeah. So let us know what you guys think, what side of the debate you guys fall on. As we always end with the episodes, if you're on YouTube watching, make sure you like, comment on the video, subscribe. We're really trying to grow our YouTube, as well as if you're on the website, subscribe to our Substack. We're here every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. New episodes. We're doing debates. We talk politics, culture, social issues. So we appreciate you guys watching. And until next time,
Peace.